Hello and welcome to the Deep Track Podcast, an exploration of watches, trends, and culture with a few adventures along the way. I'm your host, Blake Bettner. This is a special episode today being brought to you between the usual Tuesday releases. And this one is really just a reaction and discussion around some of the watches that are being released at the moment as I record this for LVMH Watch Week. I'm seeing some really cool watches coming out of LVMH Watch Week, and I wanted to get some thoughts out there before I jump into some new episodes with some additional guests. First off, a huge thank you to everyone who's made time to listen to the podcast so far. The reaction to the first handful of episodes has really just been incredible, and a huge credit to all the guests that I've had on there. It's been a huge treat to talk to each and every one of them. We have a lot more great guests on the horizon, so make sure you keep an eye out on your feed or subscribe or however you pay attention to your podcast. And a reminder that the Deep Track is reader and listener supported, so I'll leave a link to our Patreon down below. Okay, first off, I guess we can get into a wrist check first. I'm wearing an Omega Seamaster Pro Prof. This is a watch that I am currently working on a review for at the moment, and there will be a video component to that as well. If you missed, our YouTube channel did launch last week along with the Rolex Daytona 126 500 review. So go check that out if you haven't seen it, and subscribe if you feel like it. There will be more videos coming soon and coming weekly, and the next one will be of this very Pro Prof. This will be, I don't know, maybe slightly more of a conceptual type review. It's a watch that lives outside the bounds of the usual kind of practical tool watch rules. So anyways, if it's a watch that you're interested and care about, you can keep an eye out for that coming soon. All right, let's jump into it with what might be my favorite watch release of LVMH Watch Week, and that is from Zenith. This is a new Chronomaster original with a full calendar complication there, which I think works really well here with this watch. It's, of course, taking from a concept that was designed alongside the original A386 in 1969 that never came to fruition as such. However, we have seen full calendar El Primero watches, chronographs over the past 20 years, but never quite like this. And this one, I think, works tremendously well. They nailed the look of this, and they didn't really compromise what makes the Chronomaster original so great in the first place. It's still 38 millimeters in diameter. It's 13 millimeters thick. Around 46 millimeters from lug to lug. Overall, this should still kind of have all the same charm on the wrist as the chronograph, as the regular chronograph Chronomaster original. However, this one does get the full calendar, which I think works really well here, and I like how they've approached it. I like how they've executed this a lot. They've added the month above the second totalizer there, the seconds totalizer of the timing. You remember this is a tenth of a second chronograph, so it's not the usual totalizer layout that we're used to seeing. When you start the chronograph, the timing seconds that is parked at 12 o'clock kicks into action and makes a full loop of the dial in 10 seconds rather than the usual 60 seconds. So with each second that goes by, that is marked on the seconds totalizer, and then that rolls into the minutes totalizer down at the bottom. So the month is placed above that seconds totalizer, and then the day is placed above the running seconds over at 9 o'clock. And these are very simple stepped apertures down to the wheels here, which works really well. It's a very straightforward design. It doesn't really interfere with the timing legibility of this watch, or even reading the time for that matter. Of course, the date is still there at 4:30, as it always has been, or usually is with El Primero chronographs. And then the moon phase has been inserted into the minute totalizer. Not only does it look very pretty, but it seems to be a very practical implementation of a full calendar. And one thing that I want to note here is the subdials do not overlap here, which I think helps this watch. Helps the legibility of this watch quite a bit, actually. With the additional windows and information that's being displayed here, I think the tension of the overlapping and tricolor subdials would have maybe been a bit much, maybe pushed everything over the top just a bit here. So all the subdials are the same color, and they don't overlap. Each subdial has their own space to breathe here. So I think legibility still works really well on this watch, and there are 3 different dial colors here on launch. There's kind of a silver white with black subdials, and a slate gray with white subdials, and then a boutique only kind of a deep green version of it as well with white subdials that is quite lovely. And by the way, I think when they say boutique only, the online store is included in that. So these are watches that you can just hop on to Zenith.com and put in your cart and buy like that if you're so inclined. So these still have a modified El Primero. This is adding a calendar module to the 3160. So it's still high beat, 5 hertz chronograph movement. They're necessitated for the 10th of a second chronograph. So I think this watch works just really beautifully. The only one thing that I'm maybe on the fence about is the gilt details in the hour markers and the hands, which was not the case on the original concept, as I've seen it imaged at least. But that's just in pictures. I hope to go hands-on with this watch relatively soon and bring you a full review in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that. It's not an annual calendar or perpetual calendar or anything like that. You have to make all the adjustments that you normally would through some buttons along the case wall, along the 9 o'clock side of the case wall there. But overall, and that also, by the way, I think keeps obviously the price into relatively reasonable territory, more or less. On bracelet, this watch is $13,900, and on a leather strap, it is $13,400. And by the way, just a heads up. Zenith's head of heritage, Lawrence Bodenman, will be joining me on the podcast in a couple of weeks here. So we will be discussing likely this watch, the history of a few Zenith watches, and how that's got them to where they are today. So if you have any questions or you have anything that you would like to hear us talk about, feel free to hit me up at info@thedeeptrack.com. or blake@thedeeptrack.com, or find me on Instagram or wherever you would like to. So that will be coming in just a couple of weeks. That's not the only release that I like from Zenith, though. The Chronomaster Sport range also got a couple of new models. You might remember a few months back they released a green-on-green Chronomaster Sport with Arabic numeral hour markers for an Aaron Rodgers collaboration, who is a spokesperson for Zenith, or an ambassador, whatever you want to call him. So they've released another green-on-green, but this time with just the standard bar hour markers there. So if you like the green, boy, there's a lot of green so far this year. That's not the first time we'll be talking about green here in this episode. But that's not the one that I wanted to talk about. There's a different one. There's a gem set one, which is quite stunning. It's $98,000, $98,600, and it has a gold meteorite dial and then a tricolor gem set bezel that matches the colors of each of the subdials. And this is this one. I don't know. I'm not a huge precious metal guy or anything, but when they go hard, and this one goes pretty well, I think. So the bezel matching the 3 different colors of the subdials is something that we have seen in the Chronomaster Sport before, with again another boutique edition there, and then I think that one worked really well. And they actually made 3 different bezels of the 3 different colors, cut them, and then adhered the 3 different pieces together, and then put it in the insert there. So it's a similar type of situation here, but done with stones, I guess. So I am not an expert on gems, jewelry, or anything like that, but it certainly looks lovely to my eyes. So, if I was in a cost no object type situation, this is one that might have my eye a little bit more. And the hour markers themselves are baguettes, as you might expect. So, hats off to Zenith here for some really cool releases at LVMH Watch Week. Has me very curious about what we'll see in Watches and Wonders in Geneva here in April. which I will be there for, so you can keep an eye out for live coverage on all the channels that I publish to. So, okay, let's move over to Hublot, who released quite a few new watches during LVMH Watch Week, including a pretty crazy MP10 tourbillon weight energy system titanium that is, it's pretty wild. Actually, it's very difficult to describe, but it uses these weights that go up and down on the sides. And then it has kind of these rocker versions of the hours and minutes that roll. Boy, I'm probably doing a terrible job describing this. It's kind of these barrels that roll to display the time on the top under this kind of big, massive piece of sapphire within this kind of tube of titanium. Really crazy looking watch, and the MP watches from Hublot have always been that way. So it's just kind of cool to see them playing. Bringing some new ideas to life like this. But this isn't the watch that I want to talk about. They have a new SAXEM watch. It's a bright green Big Bang Unico that is made in their green SAXEM material. Of course, SAXEM is something that we've seen used quite a bit from Hublot. And, whatever your thoughts on Hublot, I really like how they push for they're really kind of looking and moving in one direction, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but everything that they do seems to be kind of moving towards innovation and really kind of trying to push the boundaries there. And SAXEM is a good example of that, and it's not entirely dissimilar to Sapphire, but it's its own thing, and it can be colored, unlike Sapphire. So it's kind of what makes this unique. And we've seen a few different colors of this SAXEM from Hublot. We've even seen green before in the Spirit of Big Bang, as well as a different one of the MP watches as well. So I think it works really well here. It's like an aluminum oxide with rare earth minerals, and while Sapphire has it's like a three-sided structure on a molecular level, SAXEM is four-sided. So it looks really incredible in person, the SAXEM stuff. So I like seeing them use it here, and it looks really well. It works really well on with the black dial components here that they've got open worked into the Unico chronograph movement here. It's not a watch that I look at and say, oh, I'd like to own that and wear it around, but it's a watch that I look at and appreciate, and it kind of brings a smile to my face, and it's it's one of those things that is an experience, maybe in a very different way, but in a similar manner to the Ploprof that I was just talking about. It might not be the most practical thing in the world, but it offers a really incredible experience, and it says something about kind of pushing ahead and pushing forward with materials, with innovation, with creativity. And I think more brands need to be doing that and taking risks like this, even if they don't end up ultimately working out. I think one of my concerns about the whole kind of throwback trend is that it leads to something of a dead end. I think it's kind of like nowhere to go. You're kind of digging yourself into that hole, and then you keep iterating on the same kind of old things. And which works for some brands, or they just slowly iterate and evolve, and that's fine. But I think some brands really have to be pushing ahead for a new generation, and that stuff ends up kind of trickling down into kind of smaller micro brand watches and smaller brands doing more creative things. This has certainly happened in the past with Hublot, and now you look at brands like Formex and a bunch of other kind of small micro brands using things like carbon and getting creative with their case architecture and things like that. I think this needs to be happening on some level up and down in the industry. So to see Hublot working with materials like this still, I think is a very good thing, again, regardless of your feelings on Hublot as a brand. They're putting R&D money into just developing just straight up new materials to get the look that they want for this kind of stuff. So, is this something that will end up kind of trickling down in more accessible watches and approachable watches? Maybe, maybe it will inspire other smaller brands to look for other more cost-effective ways to do something similar. I don't know. Not that I want other brands copying Hublot by any stretch, but I think that it's just showing that, you can think in these ways about how you're developing these watches is an inspiring thing and something that I like seeing. So hats off to Hublot here for continuing to kind of pour gas on the SAXEM as a material here. And I think it works really well. And boy, again, I don't know if I could pull this thing off, but I'd sure try. And shout out to my friend Zach Kazan here. I know he's a big fan of these things as well. All right, so moving on to TAG Heuer. This is actually, before we do TAG Heuer, let's talk just quickly about a new Bulgari. This is a new Octo Finissimo in yellow gold with a dark blue dial that I think works really well. I'm trying to get my hands on one of the titanium Octo Finissimos. I'd love to spend some time wearing it on the wrist. I've always been concerned that the flat, square shape of this watch might be a little awkward to wear like day in, day out. But that's just what it looks like to me, not having spent much time with them. So again, hopefully we'll get one of these in and be able to spend a little more time, some quality time with it, and be able to make a proper assessment of that. All right, let's go over to TAG Heuer. Finally, they have a new Carrera, the 39mm glass box with the DATO layout, which is really just their Carrera date layout that came in the late 60s. Well, the first date application on the Carrera, I think, was up at 12 o'clock, and then they pushed it over with just a single minute totalizer over at 3 o'clock, and then a date aperture over at 9 o'clock. Kind of an unusual layout, but it works here. The Carrera, of course, as a base is very kind of handsome, classic structure and design, so it works really well in the confines of that, and this works really well in the confines of the new design language of this 39mm glass box Carrera that we saw introduced last year, that has a highly dimensional dial with kind of a sloping structure around the perimeter that kind of breaks it into a couple of sections with the minute track kind of on one side and then a slope inward on the other side that the hour markers are nested into. So I love seeing this layout here brought into the new Carrera design, especially at this size. It works really well. It's a beautiful teal green color, again with the green here. I think this watch works really well, and this of course uses their in-house chronograph movement TH20-07. It's 13.8 millimeters thick, but again, a lot of that is that kind of heavily domed box sapphire crystal. And for what it's worth, it gets 80 hours of power reserve, which is pretty awesome. It's a column wheel, vertical clutch chronograph, and it's $6,500. So relatively reasonable value there for everything that you're getting. But most importantly, it's just a sharp looking watch. Now, my first move would be taking that black kind of alligator-ish strap off of it and putting something a little more appropriate on. I'd love to see TAG Heuer do more things with their strap and bracelet game. Maybe make a unique mesh bracelet for something like this, or some gray fabric straps I think would work really well for things like this. As a whole, I'm really surprised that the industry hasn't taken more care to offer a wider range of straps for their watches. I walk into like an Apple store or something like that, you see just hundreds of different colors and styles of straps for just the Apple Watch. And I feel like a lot of the people that are really into their Apple Watch have tons of them. And, I think people that are spending, $4, $5, $6, $10, $20,000 on their watch would buy every single version of a custom strap made for their watch by the OEM. I see, Tudor doing stuff like their Velcro straps. I'm surprised that there's not a ton of different colorways of those for the FXDs, and it's the same with a lot of brands. I see a lot of brands kind of rushing to put maybe sometimes even proprietary quick release type of situations so that you can swap out different straps, but then not really giving us the volume of straps that I would like to see from these brands. I think Omega does a pretty good job of this. If you go on a product page, you can kind of scroll through a dozen or more different straps and what it would look like on the watch, which is really great. And then order it right alongside the watch. Those might be a little bit on the pricier end, but I think there's an opportunity here for brands to kind of exercise more creativity with their strap game. So maybe not traditional straps, tang and buckle, NATO type stuff, but maybe entirely new systems. Like again, we've seen Apple do with the Apple Watch Ultra. I mean, they've developed a couple of new concepts for their straps, and that's whatever, $500 watch. Yeah, I think brands would be well served to exercise a little more creativity in these realms. All right, so those are the few watches that have caught my eye from LVMH Watch Week, and this is just a taste again, and hopefully I'll be getting some hands-on time with a few of these watches in the coming weeks, so keep an eye out for that, and we'll do some video content around them as necessary. Watches and Wonders is coming up in early April. I will be in Switzerland, in Geneva, for the week, meeting with many of the brands and seeing as many of the new watches as I can. So maybe a good time to get subscribed to the YouTube channel and bookmark the site, however you do it. Would love to have you around for all the coverage, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the new releases as they come in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these new releases from LVMH Watch Week as well. All right, that'll do it for this special episode. I really appreciate you tuning in. We will be back to regularly scheduled programming on Tuesday with guest Brian Friedman, and we'll be talking about cocktails. Wine cocktails, mixing cocktails, alcohol industry, pairings and stuff like that. We'll be talking about all that kind of stuff. And he's a big watch guy too, so I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about watches as well. You can tune into that on Tuesday. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, take care.